Hey, welcome back to the channel. Imagine holding in your hand what once bought a loaf of bread. Yet today, that same humble penny is worth nearly $1.5 million. This is no ordinary coin. This is the top 5 Australian 1 pennies, a masterpiece of history, a symbol of national identity, and one of the rarest treasures ever struck in copper. Let's moving on. First up, the 1938 Australian 1 penny. For most, the humble penny is nothing more than a relic of small change, an artifact of daily trade and pocketware. But for those who understand the subtlety of minting history, the nuanced shifts in engravings, and the extraordinary forces that shape scarcity, this coin represents a piece of history worth far beyond its face value. Today, it is known among elite collectors as one of the most valuable Australian coins ever struck, commanding a market price of under $800,000 and capturing the fascination of investors worldwide. To understand why this single coin has risen to such heights, one must journey back to 1938, a period of economic recovery, looming global conflict, and shifting cultural identities. The Australian Mint was preparing for a new chapter in coinage under King George VI, whose portrait would begin to appear on all denominations following the abdication crisis that shook the British monarchy in 1936. The design transition was symbolic, not only of a new king, but of stability in uncertain times. Yet in the midst of this historical moment, only a handful of 1938 1-penny coins were ever struck for official purposes, largely as test strikes and patterns rather than for circulation. These were not the copper coins of ordinary exchange that jangled in the pockets of shopkeepers and farmers. They were something far rarer, set aside in extremely limited numbers, and preserved as minting anomalies for archives, dignitaries, and later, the sharp-eyed collectors who understood their immense potential. The survival rate of these coins is astonishingly low. While standard Australian pennies of other years number in the tens of millions, the 1938 issue is estimated at fewer than a dozen known examples worldwide. This alone would make it a numismatic treasure, but its journey is not only defined by scarcity. The condition of surviving specimens elevates the narrative even further. Each known coin is carefully graded, examined under the lens of experts, and certified for authenticity. Among them, a few stand in near pristine state, with fields gleaming, lettering sharp, and surfaces untouched by time. In a marketplace where one grade difference can multiply values, the finest known 1938 Australian 1 penny stands as the undeniable champion, its pedigree confirmed by institutions and private collections alike. The financial gravity of such a coin cannot be overstated. When it was last brought to market, it commanded attention not merely from Australian collectors but from international investors, hedge funds exploring alternative assets, and museums competing for cultural artifacts that transcend geography. At $1,800,000, the 1938 penny is no longer a coin in the traditional sense. It is a store of history, an asset class, and a symbol of Australia's numismatic identity. High-grade coins such as this move beyond simple collectability. They become part of a broader narrative of wealth preservation, tangible assets in a volatile world. The rarity ensures that market values remain resilient. Unlike gold or silver, which ebb with commodity markets, a one-of-a-kind piece like this transcends fluctuations. Its value is not tied to weight in metal, but to the convergence of rarity, condition, provenance, and demand among the world's most elite. Collectors speak of it in reverent tones. Auction houses build entire campaigns around its appearance, with glossy catalogues, private previews, and invitation-only bidding rooms filled with anticipation. To own the 1938 Australian 1 penny is to hold not just a piece of metal, but a fragment of Australian identity, a representation of the nation's coinage evolution, and a direct link to the global upheavals of the late 1930s. The prestige of ownership carries weight beyond financial numbers. It is a declaration of connoisseurship, of belonging to a lineage of collectors who understand that numismatics is not merely about currency, but about history crystallized in metal. The story of this coin also reflects the broader truth about Numismatics as an investment vehicle. As markets evolve, tangible assets become increasingly attractive. Art, wine, rare manuscripts, and coins occupy a rarefied space where passion and profit intersect. The 1938 Australian one penny exemplifies this perfectly. Its rise in value over the decades has outpaced many traditional investments. Coins purchased in the mid-20th century for modest sums have, over generations, transformed into multi-million-dollar heirlooms. This trajectory is not accidental. It reflects scarcity, global demand, and the emotional weight attached to possessing something that virtually no one else can. Provenance further adds to the mystique of the 1938 penny. Each known specimen carries a documented history of ownership, passing from collectors to dealers to institutions, each transaction adding layers of authenticity and allure. Pedigree matters in this arena. A coin with a traceable, respected chain of custody not only assures authenticity, but enhances desirability. The coin at the heart of the $1,800,000 valuation stands as the finest example. Known to exist, its provenance meticulously recorded, its condition unchallenged, and its place in numismatic history undisputed. This coin's story is not confined to dusty ledgers or the confines of collectors' vaults. It resonates with broader audiences because it embodies the concept of transformation, how something as ordinary as a penny, designed for the most basic transactions of bread or milk, could, through the alchemy of history, become a treasure valued at millions. It is a reminder that value is not inherent in the material alone, but in the story, the rarity, the journey across decades, and the human desire to preserve what is unique. As we look forward, the trajectory of the 1938 Australian one penny suggests that its value will only continue to grow. Demand for top-tier coins increases with each passing decade, as global wealth searches for safe, tangible stores of value. In the upper echelons of collecting, rarity is king, and nothing embodies rarity in Australian numismatics like the 1938 penny. For investors, it represents diversification and cultural legacy. For collectors, it is the Holy Grail. For Australia, it is a national treasure, a reminder of the era when pennies passed through every hand. Yet one year, one coin stood apart, destined to outshine them all. Next up, the 1951 Australian one penny occupies a place of reverence, commanding a market price of $120,000 in its finest known form. At first glance, this coin might seem indistinguishable from the millions of other pennies that circulated during the post-war years, a time when Australia was rebuilding its economy, embracing industrial growth, and aligning itself with the new geopolitical realities of the modern era. But for those who study numismatics with a discerning eye, the 1951 penny represents far more than small change. It is an investment-grade rarity, a symbol of Australian minting heritage, and a tangible piece of history, whose story continues to captivate collectors around the globe. To understand why the 1951 penny commands six figures in today's marketplace, one must consider the broader historical context of coinage production in that year. Australia was still producing pennies in massive numbers for daily use, with mints in Melbourne, Perth, and London all contributing to the supply. But within this standard output, subtle varieties, mint marks, and striking differences created rarities that would one day separate themselves from the ocean of ordinary coins. The rarest among them emerged not because of deliberate design but due to the circumstances of minting runs, where limited test issues, small batches, and transitional varieties were created, often unnoticed by the public at the time. The 1951 Australian one penny that commands $120,000 is not just any coin struck for general use. It belongs to a class of extremely limited survivors, often identified by unique die pairings, striking errors, or mint-specific characteristics that set them apart. These coins were not intended for wide circulation. Rather, they exist as unintentional artifacts, anomalies in the minting process that escaped destruction and went on to survive through the decades. The rarity is such that only a handful of specimens remain in superior condition, brilliantly preserved, unblemished by the heavy wear that most pennies endured in pockets, tills, and trades across post-war Australia. Condition is everything in numismatics. While a circulated 1951 penny may fetch only a few cents from casual collectors, the finest examples, those preserved in mint state grades with sharp details, unbroken luster, and pristine surfaces, enter an entirely different realm of valuation. The coin at the $120,000 level represents precisely this pinnacle of preservation. Graded by professional authorities and certified for authenticity, it embodies the highest standards of numismatic desirability. The sharpness of the king's portrait, the clarity of the lettering, and the deep copper tones of its fields set it apart as one of the best-known survivors from that year. What drives collectors to pay such sums for a single coin? The answer lies in the convergence of rarity, history, and the prestige of ownership. The 1951 penny speaks to a period in Australia when coins were more than currency. They were national symbols that connected everyday life with the broader narrative of empire and independence. Bearing the image of King George VI, it captures the twilight of his reign, a monarch who steered Britain and the Commonwealth through the tribulations of war and into the uncertain years that followed. In numismatics, context matters deeply. Coins are time capsules, and the 1951 penny is no exception. Financially, coins like this operate within a unique sector of the collectibles market. Unlike commodities, whose values rise and fall with supply and demand, rare coins occupy a class where scarcity is absolute. There will never be more 1951 pennies of this caliber. What exists now is all that the world will ever know. As such, their value is protected not only by demand, but by the immutable fact of rarity. Investors recognize this stability and increasingly turn to high-value coins as alternative assets, diversifying portfolios with tangible pieces of history that have consistently outperformed traditional markets over the long term. Auction houses treat the 1951 penny with the same gravitas reserved for fine art or rare manuscripts. Catalogs dedicate pages to its provenance, condition, and rarity. Private viewings are held for serious bidders, each aware that opportunities to acquire such a coin are measured, not in years but in decades. When the gavel falls, the winning bidder does not merely purchase a coin, they acquire a piece of numismatic heritage that will carry prestige and value for generations. Ownership becomes a mark of distinction, signaling membership in the small, exclusive circle of collectors who understand and command the highest levels of the numismatic market. Provenance adds another layer of fascination. Each known example of the rare 1951 penny carries a chain of ownership, often involving renowned collectors, respected dealers, and prestigious auctions. This pedigree enhances the coin's story, linking it to figures and institutions that have long shaped the history of collecting in Australia. Collectors do not only value the metal, they value the journey, the record of where the coin has been, and the hands that have safeguarded it across the decades. The appeal of the 1951 Australian one penny also lies in its transformation from the ordinary to the extraordinary. It was designed to be a coin of daily commerce, to buy bread, milk, or a tram ticket. Yet through an accident of history and the forces of preservation, it has become something worth more than a suburban home. This alchemy, the turning of base currency into priceless treasure, captures the imagination and speaks to the essence of numismatics itself. Looking forward, the trajectory of such a coin suggests only upward movement in value. As global wealth expands and elite collectors continue to chase the rarest of the rare, competition intensifies for coins of this caliber. The market is international, no longer confined to Australian shores. Collectors from Asia, Europe, and North America increasingly recognize the importance of Australia's numismatic history, and the 1951 penny stands as one of its crown jewels. With every passing decade, the number of potential buyers grows, while the supply remains eternally fixed. That imbalance, simple in economic terms, assures that coins like this will not only retain, but increase in value. The 1951 Australian one penny valued at $120,000, is thus far more than a coin. It is history forged in copper, a story preserved in metal, and a symbol of rarity that bridges the past with the future. It embodies the resilience of a nation, the prestige of collecting, and the timeless allure of owning something almost no one else can. For those fortunate enough to behold it, let alone acquire it, the coin is not just currency but legacy, an artifact that ensures its place among the most extraordinary treasures of Australian numismatics. Next up, the story of the 1939 Australian one penny is one that transcends ordinary numismatics. It is not simply the tale of a copper coin, minted for daily commerce, destined to pass through countless hands before disappearing into circulation. Rather, it is the story of a national treasure, an extraordinary rarity, whose survival is almost miraculous, whose design reflects a fleeting moment in history, and whose scarcity has elevated it into one of the most valuable coins Australia has ever known. Today, in the elite world of numismatic investment and heritage collecting, the 1939 Australian one penny commands a staggering valuation of $1,600. It is a coin that symbolizes prestige, rarity, and the unbroken link between history and tangible wealth. To understand the significance of this coin, one must first look to the year itself. 1939 was a watershed moment, not only for Australia, but for the entire globe. It was the year the Second World War erupted, reshaping economies, societies, and national priorities. Against this backdrop of uncertainty, Australia's coinage entered a brief but meaningful transition. For decades, Australian pennies had carried the iconic Commonwealth of Australia reverse design, with a simple ringed inscription surrounding the denomination. But by 1939, a new reverse design had been approved, featuring the leaping kangaroo, an image that would go on to define Australia's coinage for generations. This was no ordinary change. It was a bold declaration of national identity, the moment Australia began to express itself on its coinage with a uniquely Australian symbol rather than purely imperial motifs. The 1939 penny thus exists in two distinct forms: the final issue of the old Commonwealth design, and the first experimental run of the new kangaroo reverse. It is within this transition that rarity was born. Only a very small number of the new design were struck in that year as part of a pattern issue, essentially test pieces to prepare for the mass production of kangaroo pennies beginning in 1940. These test strike coins were never intended for wide circulation. They were experimental, set aside for evaluation, and in most cases, destined for destruction. Yet through fortune and circumstance, a minuscule number survived, preserved by keen-eyed collectors or retained within mint archives. What separates the 1939 Australian one penny valued at $1,600,000 from all others is its status as one of the finest surviving examples of the kangaroo reverse. This coin represents the precise moment when Australian coinage shed its older identity and embraced a bold new national image. The rarity is immense. Fewer than a dozen examples are believed to exist worldwide. Of those, only a small handful have been graded at the highest levels, displaying the full brilliance of the strike, the untouched surfaces of original copper, and the exquisite detail of a design that was as experimental as it was symbolic. Condition plays an unparalleled role in the valuation of this coin, where a standard, circulated 1939, penny might be worth only a fraction of its original face value. The coin in question here represents the very pinnacle of preservation. It is a gem-quality piece, certified by leading authorities in numismatics, with sharp detail across every surface and a luster that belies its age. Coins like this are almost mythological in their survival, pieces that were meant to be destroyed, yet endure in near-perfect state, defying the odds and securing their place as treasures of immense historical and financial significance. The financial narrative of the 1939 Australian penny is nothing short of remarkable. Over the decades, its value has risen dramatically, reflecting both its rarity and its appeal as a symbol of Australian national identity. At $1,600,000, It now occupies the highest echelons of the numismatic market, standing alongside the great rarities of the world, such as the American 1804 silver dollar or the British 1933 penny. But its significance is not only measured in dollars, it is measured in the prestige and allure of ownership. For the collector fortunate enough to acquire it, the coin is more than an investment. It is a statement of discernment, of passion, and of alignment with history itself. Auction houses treat this coin with the reverence of fine art. Its appearances are rare, and when it does come to market, the atmosphere is electric. Catalogues are carefully produced, with detailed photography and scholarly analysis of its provenance. Private previews are arranged for the most serious bidders, who fly across continents for the chance to hold in their hands a piece of Australia's numismatic crown jewel. When the bidding begins, it is not merely a competition of wealth, but a contest of prestige. Each bid reflecting not just financial capability, but the desire to possess something almost no one else can. The provenance of surviving 1939 pennies adds further allure. Each specimen carries with it a history of ownership, linking it to notable collectors, institutions and dealers. The coin that achieves $1,600,000 is not an isolated object. It is part of a lineage, a story that begins with the experimental runs of 1939 and stretches across generations of numismatic history. Ownership confers not only possession, but stewardship, the responsibility of safeguarding an artifact that is, in truth, part of Australia's cultural and historical legacy. What makes the 1939 penny truly captivating is the duality of its identity. It is both ordinary and extraordinary. It began life as a penny, humble, utilitarian, and destined for everyday use in corner shops and marketplaces. Yet because of timing, rarity, and survival, it transformed into a treasure that now commands more than $1 million. This transformation is at the heart of numismatics itself, the ability of history, scarcity, and preservation to elevate the ordinary into the extraordinary, turning copper into legacy and commerce into art. Looking forward, the trajectory of this coin suggests even greater appreciation in value. With every passing decade, as collectors and investors compete for the world's most extraordinary rarities, coins like the 1939 penny become ever more desirable. Their supply is finite, their demand ever growing, and their appeal transcends national borders. Australian coinage has carved out a respected place in the international numismatic stage, and the 1939 penny stands at the very center of that recognition. The 1939 Australian 1 penny, valued today at $1,600,000, is thus more than currency. It is a historical milestone, a masterpiece of numismatic art, and a cultural treasure of immense significance. It embodies the moment when Australia declared itself on its coinage with a leaping kangaroo, standing tall as a symbol of identity and independence. It embodies the resilience of a nation stepping into a new chapter of history at the dawn of a global war. And it embodies the timeless truth that rarity, preservation, and history can converge to create something priceless. For collectors, investors, and historians alike, it is not merely a coin, it is a legacy, a treasure to be cherished, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest objects carry the greatest stories. Next up, the 1950 Australian 1 penny is not just a coin, it is a chapter of national history pressed into copper, a relic of mid-20th century Australia that today stands as one of the most desirable rarities in the world of numismatics. At first glance, it resembles the millions of other pennies that jingled in the pockets of Australians in the post-war era. But beneath that seemingly ordinary surface lies a story of rarity, preservation, and historical significance that has elevated this particular year's issue into the upper echelons of collectible value. In its finest known form, the 1950 Australian 1 penny has achieved a market valuation of $150,000, a figure that reflects not just its scarcity, but also its symbolic importance in Australia's coinage heritage. To appreciate why the 1950 penny has reached such extraordinary value, one must step into the world of numismatics, where details matter, where the subtle variations in mint marks, die engravings, and production anomalies separate the commonplace from the extraordinary. The year 1950 was pivotal in Australian coinage. Pennies were still the foundation of daily commerce, minted in large quantities at multiple locations. Yet among these standard issues emerged an ultra-rare subset of coins that would one day be recognized as treasures. The key lies in rarity, specifically the small number of special mint issues, test strikes, and exceptionally preserved examples that survived through time. What makes the 1950 penny valued at $150,000 so remarkable is not only its scarcity, but its immaculate condition. Coins struck for circulation inevitably endured wear, scratches, contact marks, and the dulling of their original surfaces. But the handful of surviving 1950 pennies that remain in gem, uncirculated condition tell a different story. These coins carry their original mint luster, their details as sharp as the day they were struck, their copper surfaces unspoiled by time. For collectors, such perfection is the ultimate goal. It is the difference between a coin worth cents and a coin worth a fortune. Grading agencies and numismatic authorities confirm this value, certifying only the rarest, finest survivors at this exalted level. The 1950 penny is also significant for what it represents in history. It bears the portrait of King George VI, a monarch whose reign had spanned a world war and who symbolized resilience and unity for the Commonwealth. By 1950, Australia was stepping into a new era of economic stability and post-war reconstruction. Coins minted during this period are, therefore, more than currency. They are touchstones of a nation recovering and redefining itself. To hold such a coin today is to hold a tangible link to that pivotal moment, when Australia was reshaping its identity at home and abroad. The financial trajectory of this coin tells its own remarkable story. In the decades following 1950, few paid attention to the subtleties of minting varieties. Pennies were workhorses of commerce, rarely admired and often discarded. But as the numismatic market matured, collectors began to recognize the extraordinary rarity of certain issues. Values climbed steadily, and the very finest specimens began to attract not only collectors but also investors, seeking alternative assets with resilience and growth potential. At $150,000, the 1950 penny now represents a serious investment, its value no longer confined to hobbyists, but recognized across the broader financial world as a store of wealth, history and prestige. Auction houses treat the 1950 penny with extraordinary reverence. When one of the finest examples comes to market, the coin is showcased like a masterpiece of art, displayed under careful lighting to emphasize its glowing copper surfaces and razor-sharp details. Catalogs dedicate entire sections to its description, highlighting provenance, condition, and historical significance. Bidding wars erupt between seasoned collectors and international investors, each aware that opportunities to acquire such a rarity are vanishingly rare. To win such a coin is to secure not merely an object, but a legacy. Provenance plays a vital role in the coin's appeal. The most valuable 1950 pennies can often be traced through a lineage of ownership, passing through the hands of renowned collectors, dealers, and institutions. This chain of custody provides assurance of authenticity, while also enriching the narrative of the coin itself. Collectors value not only the metal, but also the story of how the coin survived, how it was recognized, and how it became enshrined as one of the treasures of Australian numismatics. At its heart, the 1950 penny embodies the paradox that defines numismatics, the transformation of the ordinary into the extraordinary. Designed to buy bread, milk, or a tram ticket, it was a coin of everyday necessity, never meant to be admired beyond its function. And yet, through the forces of history, preservation, and human fascination with rarity, it has been elevated into a treasure worth more than a luxury car, more than many homes, and equal in prestige to the finest artifacts of its era. This alchemy of value, the metamorphosis of small change into priceless legacy, captures the imagination and underlines why collectors devote lifetimes to the pursuit of coins such as this. The future of the 1950 Australian one penny is bright. With each passing year, as global wealth grows and collectors continue to chase the rarest treasures, demand intensifies for coins of this caliber. The supply, however, is absolutely fixed. There will never be more than the handful of finest 1950 pennies already known to exist. This imbalance between scarcity and demand assures continued appreciation in value. For the investor, it is stability and growth. For the collector, it is pride and prestige. For Australia, it is cultural heritage, encapsulated in copper. The 1950 Australian 1 penny, with its current valuation of $150,000, stands as a beacon of what numismatics is all about: history, rarity, beauty, and the timeless appeal of holding in one's hand a piece of the past, transformed into a treasure for the future. It is not just a coin. It is a symbol of resilience, a fragment of identity, and a masterpiece of preservation. For those who pursue it, it represents the pinnacle of collecting, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own a piece of Australia's numismatic crown. Next up, the 1940 Australian 1 penny stands as one of the most iconic rarities in the history of Australian numismatics. It is not just a coin, it is a monument in copper, a bridge between two eras, and a timeless symbol of national identity. Valued today at an extraordinary $450,000 in its finest form, this single penny embodies a unique intersection of rarity, history, and artistry that few objects on Earth can match. To the casual eye, it may look like a simple piece of small change, a copper coin designed for the most ordinary transactions of everyday life. But to the numismatist, the historian, and the connoisseur of rare assets, the 1940 penny represents something infinitely greater. The beginning of a new chapter in Australian coinage, a national emblem immortalized in metal, and one of the rarest and most desirable coins ever produced on Australian soil. To understand its prestige, we must journey back to the late 1930s. For decades, Australian pennies had carried the conservative Commonwealth of Australia reverse, a simple, circular design that mirrored Britain's sense of tradition and continuity. But in 1939, as the clouds of war gathered and Australia faced the challenges of defining its own national identity within the Commonwealth, a bold new design was introduced: the leaping kangaroo. For the first time, Australia's most distinctive native animal became the centerpiece of the nation's most widely circulated coin. It was a statement of pride, independence, and cultural uniqueness, a symbol that proclaimed Australia was no longer merely borrowing imperial motifs but expressing itself with imagery born of its own land. The first kangaroo pennies were struck in 1939 as test patterns, produced in minuscule numbers, and now among the rarest coins in existence. By 1940, the design was ready for full-scale production, and thus the 1940 penny marks the inaugural year of the kangaroo, reverse in official circulation. It is this historical significance, being the very first widely released kangaroo penny, that sets the coin apart. But rarity, as always, tells the rest of the story. While millions of pennies were produced during the war years, the survival of the 1940 issue in the very highest grades is virtually non-existent. The finest known examples are breathtaking in their preservation. The copper gleams with original mint luster. The strike is sharp and precise, and the kangaroo design leaps from the surface with vitality. To hold such a specimen is to glimpse the coin exactly as it was intended, untouched by time, commerce, or wear. Condition is everything in the numismatic marketplace. A 1940, penny in average circulated condition may be worth little more than a sentimental keepsake, but in pristine mint state, the coin transforms into a treasure worth well over $1 million. The example, valued at $450,000, represents the pinnacle of preservation, certified at the highest grade, authenticated by experts, and recognized globally as one of the greatest Australian copper coins ever struck. Its rarity lies not only in the limited number of surviving specimens, but in the almost mythological perfection of its condition. Very few coins from 1940 could possibly have survived in such flawless state, untouched by decades of use, storage, or environmental damage. The financial trajectory of this coin has been extraordinary. For decades, collectors admired the 1940 penny as a landmark in design and history. But as the global numismatic market matured, its status as the first true kangaroo issue elevated it into an elite class of collectibles. Today, it stands alongside world rarities such as the American 1804 silver dollar and the British 1933 penny, coins that transcend their nations of origin to command international recognition. At $450,000, the 1940 Australian penny is more than a collectible. It is a wealth asset, a secure store of value, and a tangible connection to a nation's story. Auction houses treat the 1940 penny with the reverence of fine art. When one of the finest examples comes to market, it is presented not simply as a coin, but as a masterpiece. Catalogs are designed with glossy photography, capturing every nuance of its gleaming surfaces. Detailed essays explain its historical significance, its provenance, and its rarity. Private viewings are arranged for elite bidders, serious collectors, and investors who understand that opportunities to acquire such treasures are vanishingly rare. In the auction room, the atmosphere is electric. Each bid represents not only financial power but the desire to own a piece of history. And when the gavel finally falls, the successful buyer acquires not just a coin, but a legacy, one that carries immense prestige and cultural resonance. Provenance adds another dimension to its allure. The rarest 1940 pennies can be traced through chains of ownership, involving prominent collectors, respected dealers, and prestigious institutions. Each owner has contributed to the coin's story, safeguarding it across generations. This lineage enhances the coin's mystique and reinforces its authenticity. Collectors value not only the object, but the story of survival. The fact that this piece of history has passed carefully from hand to hand, protected from the ravages of time. At the heart of the 1940 penny's appeal is the extraordinary paradox that defines numismatics, the transformation of the ordinary into the extraordinary. This was, after all, a coin designed to buy bread, milk, or a tram fare. Millions were made for the most mundane of purposes. Yet through the forces of history, preservation, and rarity, one specimen has become a treasure worth $450,000. It is this alchemy, this metamorphosis of base currency into priceless heritage, that captures the imagination and inspires collectors. Coins like this remind us that history is not abstract. It is tangible, touchable, and, in the right circumstances, immeasurably valuable. Looking to the future, the 1940 Australian penny is poised to grow even more significant. As wealth expands globally and collectors increasingly compete for the rarest artifacts, demand for coins of this caliber intensifies. The supply, however, is fixed for eternity. There will never be more than the handful of finest 1940 pennies already known to exist. This imbalance, absolute scarcity against ever-expanding demand, ensures continued appreciation in value. For investors, the coin is a secure and prestigious asset. For collectors, it is the pinnacle of achievement. For Australia, it is a national symbol, representing the dawn of the kangaroo, coinage that would define the nation's identity in metal for generations. The 1940 Australian penny, valued at $450,000, is therefore more than a coin. It is history crystallized in copper. It is the story of a nation asserting its cultural identity through its currency. It is a relic of resilience at the dawn of global conflict, a masterpiece of preservation, and one of the most coveted treasures of numismatics. To own it is to own a fragment of history, a legacy of artistry, and a timeless symbol of prestige. It is not small change, it is priceless heritage, a crown jewel of Australia's numismatic tradition, and a masterpiece that will continue to inspire awe for centuries to come.